welcome to our new video reviews platform, collaboration between Dance Dialogues and Dance Art Journal. I'm Rachel, and for March I'm joined by Ines as guest on behalf of Dance Art Journal. So this episode is a special edition in that all the works we saw throughout March that we're covering in this episode are part of a festival called Dance Reflections by Cleef and Arpels. Which has been on across various London venues throughout March. So we're going to be talking about some of those shows, a few that we've seen together and a couple that I saw myself.
Yeah, we went to see lots of shows.
A lot of shows.
And some of them together. First of all, tell me about the ones you've seen before we went to see one together.
Yeah, so I think the first ones I managed to get to in the festival were Rizzo's, the English title is An Overprotected Eye Always Gets Sand in It, which was on the same evening as a double bill by Trisha and Soulier, with two pieces in the full and working title. And what I liked about this evening is that the first work by Rizzo was at Lillian Baylis, which is the studio theatre at South Wales, and the Trisha Brown Soulier work was on in the main house. So actually there was a couple of events during the festival that had this programming, and I really like that format because you got to see something in a studio setting that was a bit more intimate, and then see something on the main stage, which obviously allows a grander scale and more lighting and spectacle and things like this. And I think it was nice to just have an evening of dance where you get two contrasting.
Yeah. And it brings the festival vibe in a way, because you ended up in one day, one evening to see different works in different locations.
Yeah, exactly, and works that had kind of different contexts and different feels to them. So that was a really nice element of it that I enjoyed. So Rizzo's work was the first that I saw that evening, and this was a solo performance, and I really loved it. I felt like it just had a lot of clarity. It began with this very slow, sustained movement, and then this gradually built into movement that picked up pace a bit more. And it flitted between these two different states, but was just very well structured. It was simple yet precise, and it had this one set piece that gradually throughout the piece unfolded into more set pieces and built this kind of miniature world on stage. I think maybe this is something that drew me into it, because I really like work that uses set in this way, where it kind of just builds as part of the choreography as you go along. And I felt this did that really well. I feel like what I got from it was this sense of quite literally building a home, of a place to be, a place to stay, but it was kind of quite, in a sense, that this was a temporary place to inhabit. It felt at the end that the performer kind of moved on from it. And for me, I felt like this kind of gave this gentle commentary on life. Maybe that's a bit deep, but it did this without offering something specific, and I feel that's something you can do really beautifully through dance. You can talk about something quite expansive and big as a subject, but manage to do that without talking precisely about something, just through qualities and images and the way things are put together. And that was something I really enjoyed seeing in this piece.
So I think for some audience members, probably the experience or the way they were receiving the work was slightly different.
Probably, yeah. I think this is what I felt watching it and what I got in connection with it. For someone else, they might not have got that at all. But this is kind of the interesting thing about dance. For me, that piece, I really connected with it, and maybe some other reviewers I spoke to maybe on the same night didn't find that same connection. But yeah, I think that's a really beautiful thing with dance, in that it can speak to people in different ways, and you can get a different experience watching the same piece of work. That was a solo performance, and then we went to the main theatre at South Wales, and we got to see a piece by the dancers of Trisha Brown Company, doing think the first work was In the Fall by Soulier, and the second work was Working Title by Trisha Brown. The first piece, I mean, actually the whole evening of that was really quite beautiful. The first piece was a lot more, I don't want to say academic, in the way that it used the choreography and the modern dance movement language. It started in quite a way that I was like, oh, it feels quite defined and maybe a bit dry, for want of a better word. I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to enjoy this so much. But then gradually it built these layers with the dancers' entrances and exits, and it just became really pure and really clear. That was quite beautiful, actually. That's quite a piece with a lot of space and breath in it. And then the second piece, which was Trisha Brown's Working Title, I actually just really wish I could have watched it again, because it had this same, the modern dance movement language, but it just had this really playful vibe, joyful vibe, which was quite a contrast to the more serious element of the first half. So the dancers had this really highly technical movement, but they just did it with very casual quality, which was really beautiful to watch. And I also felt the way they performed it with that kind of casualness, very human approach to very technical movement made that dance very watchable. So seeing something that is quite precise and comes from a very clear technique became really accessible as an audience. So that's something I loved about that. And it was just light and joyful, and the way the movement layered, there was a lot of details in the interactions between the dancers and in the choreography, and I kind of got lost in it. It was very mesmeric, and I think because of that I was like, I want to see it again, because there was just so much there. And for me it was just a very suspended, beautiful moment. And I think the two pieces in that bill kind of worked nicely together in that way. The one was more stripped back, and then the second piece had a lot more content and vibrancy to it.
Yeah. How did you feel at the end of the night, seeing all these different works?
Yeah, I felt like it was, for me, the first things I went to see in the festival. For me, it was a great way to start it. It felt like, great, I got to see some, two really different pieces of dance, but both really strong for me in their own ways, and both completely different in their styles, but both coming from this contemporary dance world. So for me that felt like kind of an ideal way to come into a dance festival.
That's great.
And I think the next one we actually got to see was One Together.
Oh yes, that's true. Horde, Salazar East. Age of content.
Marseilles. This was a wild piece. And if I'm honest, I thought my first thought at the start was I'm gonna hate this, which I didn't expect.
Why did you say that?
So I think it was just maybe it's a little spoiler alert. There was this car on stage, and I don't know, there was just something about the vibe of it, and the solo dancer that came out in this juicy tracksuit and big fake bird, and the very almost sexualized commercial kind of movement that they were doing on the car. I just felt I don't know if I'm gonna like this work, which is not the feeling that stayed with me. It switched very quickly, actually. But it was interesting, that piece I actually really enjoyed. This is how I started out with it. And I think I don't know, I think the turning point for me was when the rest of the company came onto the stage, and it was just, everyone looked identical. It was just this group of faceless, identical people, and the dance became more violent, a lot more layered, and suddenly it was this kind of commentary, quite clearly on a range of things, on consumerism, on social media, maybe an age of influencers, and just always being fed this image of things having to be a certain way or conforming to certain ways, and maybe it was from that point when suddenly I had loads more coming in and loads more happening, that I was okay, actually no.
Yeah.
I'm getting some more of this, and yeah, and I actually really loved it.
Yeah. To me, the beginning and the car as part of the set, and also the lights and the dog barking sounds, and it kind of brings like that thriller film vibes. And I was really curious, like, okay, what's going on, and what can we expect from this? So I was really curious right at the starting point. Making lots of questions. But yeah, to me also, I think the moment I was like, oh, okay, this is it, was really also when more dancers joined the stage, and especially the fight scene in the car. The fact that they were wearing the same tracksuits, same colors, with the masks, kind of like, it's hard to spot a different identity, but at the same time they were fighting to get on top of the car and be on the spotlight. And then realizing there was someone else controlling the car and moving the car in a way that they were falling down and trying to go back up. So it really makes me think that like there's always someone in our world, in algorithms, social media. It's always someone else in control. But at the same time, the influencer digital world, that you always want to be on top and the center of attention. So I think that part was really, it really stayed with me the whole time. And also, during the piece, also the robotic movements of some of the dancers, and we talk about this quite a lot, that for some moments I completely forgot they were humans at all. And that's amazing how you can get with the quality of the movements and have this feeling that like I'm not seeing humans anymore, I'm seeing robots or video games characters.
Yeah, it's amazing they managed to do that with physicality. I definitely want to mention that more, but I was just thinking also, like, when you were talking about the car and like that control, I felt like actually it's amazing all that came out of this first moment where you're like, oh, is this like a thriller with this car coming towards a garage, and it's very, this kind of dark spookiness, but then all this those strong images we just talked about evolved out of that, and then went into these further sections like you were just mentioning with the robotic quality of movement, and what the thing I really loved about that too was just like the detail of it. For me, it reminded me of like The Sims and like video games and the way characters move in those, and just like what the dancers managed to pick out, I thought was like just so effective. Like the fact you forgot, like you felt like you could just forget they were humans. But it's even to the point where like kind of they brought in like little glitches to the physicality, like hitching up against the wall but the character's still doing this thing, or just like the moments of breath, like the character standing still but it was just, they were just breathing. And I thought like the level of detail they took to achieve that was
and like, even bouncing when you have like games characters waiting to like for the action to start. That those little moments were amazing.
I think they like really made it with that work. So those were things that really stood out for us. And then the ending, like the last section of the dance, that was quite it was just like what's like an endorphin rush, like all this physicality, a dance that kind of started out like I think with that one dancer going, and then gradually more coming in, and it just kept building and kept building and kept going. And it was just like this whole huge, really dancey physicality. Dance is probably not the best word, but compared to like the previous stuff that was very stylized in each particular kind of scene and detail, to then have something that was just full on dancing was very euphoric.
And building that stamina at the end of the performance after everything that happened before, it was crazy to see the amount of extra energy that you need to add for this last bit. And it felt really like more showbiz vibes, bit jazzy, and look at me again on the spotlight, and thinking about the spotlight side. But you see right, like the amount of energy, it was really intense. I felt it was like a really intense way to end.
It's kind of gleeful, but like manically
gleeful.
And it's just like this, the whole thing was kind of this sort of almost not otherworldly, like a kind of alternate reality in a lot of ways, in different kinds of realities.
Parallel realities happening at the same time. And I was actually curious about that and these different parallel realities, because when it was over, to me it felt really short. It felt shorter than it was. And I was really like, what if there's like a new section here? What if this continues, and what else La Horde could bring here? I was really curious and thinking about like what other angles and parallel realities or scenarios could also be part of Age of Content.
Because I guess it managed to touch on a lot of things anyway, like the gaming and VR, robotics, and like social media, consumerism, like all these elements that came in. And it was quite a lengthy work. So the fact you felt it felt short, like just shows, kind of how engaging it was. I think,
and bold,
and wild, and but a lot of fun actually. So we didn't get to see all of the dance in this festival. There was a lot on and a lot in March. But I think one of the next things we got to see together was one of those other double programmes where there was a piece first in Lillian Baylis in the studio setup, and then a piece on the main stage. So the first one we saw was George's Labbat in Lillian Baylis, and this was like a solo piece that was also not a solo.
So do you feel it was more for you a solo or a duet?
I think for me, elements of both. So this piece had the solo performer, and then also this like mannequin transparent resin-like material, which was kind of human-sized, and the dancer was dancing with this mannequin. So some moments it did feel like it was a dancer manipulating a mannequin, and then others it felt more like there was this real relationship between them as two bodies on stage. So I had these kind of contrasting moments that kind of came in and out throughout the piece for me.
Yeah, that's true. And there was some moments also in terms of the dynamic of the movement, thinking about the duet side, and when I was seeing a duet also, there was some moments that really stayed with me, especially when the performer was spinning across the stage. There was some moments like it felt that the power dynamic has changed, and I could see the mannequin leading the movement. It's like, oh wow. And then when it became slower, I could only see the solo piece and the mannequin that completely not like a live being at all. I felt to me there was this different glimpses of dynamics and actions happening. But at the same time, sometimes I felt that it was a bit too much in one of the moments before leading up to something new. So for me, sometimes I felt distracted a bit and kind of hard to focus in some moments unless something new went on, especially this difference in power and dynamic.
Yeah, and I think for me the moments that like drew me in were the ones where like different, not just different dynamics of movements, but like dynamics of emotion came out, where it felt like, okay, this bit's really tender, or this bit's kind of more violent, and you started questioning what is this relationship with the mannequin or person body on stage. And for me that was the moments that drew me in, where it became more about human emotion rather than dancing with this object. And it's really interesting actually choreographically some of the kind of like lifts the dancer did with this body, because obviously it's not a human who can like interact, but moments it did feel like it, and maybe that was like the interesting element where it shifted between these two states and you never quite knew which one you wanted it to be or which one they wanted you to read out.
And also the light design element was particularly interesting in some moments, because there was this blackout and the mannequin was placed somewhere different, and then there was a blackout again and the light went on, and there's also the mannequin and the performer, and it was quite interesting how they play around the light.
It kind of gave it this like uncanny quality to this body on stage.
Exactly. But I think it was a good start of the evening before we moved to the main auditorium at Sadler's Wells for the Ballet du Grand Théâtre de Genève.
And the choreography. Rashid Ouramdane. I probably said that very badly. Ouramdane. This piece was called Outsider. Yeah, for me it was definitely a spectacle. It brought together like the dancers, Ballet de Genève, with 4, they're calling the program extreme sport athletes. So what was your thoughts on this?
Both elements of dance and acrobatics coexisting at the same time on stage, and usually we link both to spectacle, as you said, but maybe it's not that common to see them together on stage. And it starts with that element of constant lifts and group movement and flow. So really kind of like bring the energy on before we start seeing more the acrobatics side happening. Which I felt that they didn't really merge and mix with each other as I was expecting. I don't know about you, Rachel.
Yeah, I think I felt the same. There was moments where, like, physically the dancers and the performers on the tightropes connected, like with moments of reaching or echoes in like the placements and the movements on the stage. But for me, I don't know if it went so far beyond that. I felt like it did quite often feel like 2 separate entities that were within the same space, and visually it would look quite beautiful a lot of the time. But I kind of wanted there to be more like connection in some way between the two. For me, it did feel a little.
Many times I was also like holding my breath, because there was also this element of like pushing the limits in the ballet, especially keeping the balance. And some moments were really like, wow, what is this? But then as I said, maybe we were expecting something else to happen, this merge between the movement and the acrobatic side. And maybe that's why we also spot different reactions across the audience. We were commenting that the person sitting next to me was constantly saying like, wow, every time something new came up, and was super enthusiastic about the work. And it was a different thing for the person next to me.
I think fell asleep at one point. But I think that just kind of shows these different ways like you interact with dance, different pieces speak to you. And the same piece can have like completely opposite things,
reactions,
from each person. But it had that element of risk to it, which did keep you like engaged.
Looking back at that evening, I think it was definitely like a night of like duality at some point, with some really strong moments in both of the pieces. There was really like fantastic and spectacular and striking and memorable, and other ones that kind of like takes your attention away and it's harder to focus on.
I think that's a really nice summary. And we had one more piece that we managed to see together in the festival, and that was Pigeons and Crow by Jules Cunningham. So we started with Crow, and this was a duet, but also with a DJ on stage. I think what I enjoyed about this one was there was lots of different elements happening with the projection design, the live music and the dance. And for me, that's, I think, maybe like what I enjoyed most about this piece was the different connections between the collaborators that you could see happening in the work. I think for me, that's what I found most interesting.
And many times the role of the DJ, it didn't feel like a separate as the rest of the performance, and sometimes the DJ was also coming into the duet and it became a trio, and it was kind of like completing each other depending on the elements. I felt the same with the video projection, that it was an element that it was also there, really part of the performance, and not something extra.
Exactly. Like they all kind of needed to be there to make this whole piece, which made it really...
and it got a bit more dynamic, I think, also because of that. It was a short one. And coming back from the interval to see Pigeons, they felt different, but as I was telling you, that Jules kind of going to see Jules' work, you kind of like identify this movement technique is really like strong for the audiences to like figure it out. But even with this like movement quality, kind of felt really different from the first one to the second to Pigeons.
I think Pigeons kind of maybe Crow felt more like kind of an installation vibe, and Pigeons felt more like a dance piece. And there were, I think, maybe 5 dancers. Maybe we should check that one. But they were all kind of, they all felt very connected on stage, like they were working with and around each other, kind of working in conversation. There was a lot of like complex pathways and the way they kind of dipped in and out of the movement phrases. But I think I found that like fluidity and clear relationship between the individual dancers on stage, like that for me was the thing that I found most engaging in pigeons.
But also as a group, they work really well, and as I said, communicating and engaging with each other. I feel that you could pay attention to one dancer and you work, but also as a collective, as one. Also, it worked really well. And yeah, we stay for the post-performance talk with Jules and the dancers and all the creatives, collaborators involved. And I really enjoyed to hear more about the starting point of pigeons, how Jules started paying more attention to pigeons during the pandemic, because the streets were empty, no humans were there, and the pigeons were kind of like taking over the space and the city. It was quite interesting to think about that when life goes as normal. They have to adjust and adapt to the space we occupy in the city, and it's interesting when we're not there, how they behave and how we actually start paying more attention. So definitely some of those movements, the wings and the tiptoes of the dancers, kind of like simulating the walks of the pigeons. Some of these little like details of the movement were really there as a term of like meditating and paying more attention to these little details.
Yeah, that's true. And then also, we also had this kind of overview of it that was just, as a piece of dance, quite mesmeric for me anyway. Just watching the fluidity of movement, which in a sense kind of for me had echoes of like how a flock of birds like might move within the same space together, and didn't necessarily have to be pigeons for me in that moment, but it kind of had that sense of negotiation of space, and maybe sometimes of the fluidity of like flight and birds movement in that more motion sense rather than just the strutting sense. And it wasn't too pigeon focused, and because we were talking earlier that Ines was a little apprehensive because she has a pigeon phobia. But
so
anyone
I felt really safe watching the show. And it was a great closing to our month of coming to Dance Reflections. And it was really nice to see so many different works from international companies, and many of them we don't usually see in London, and in different venues. So
it was a really lovely, like, varied program of dance, even though we didn't get to see all the works that were there. I think what we did see was a really strong selection actually, and really mixed types of contemporary dance and ways of looking at dance. And nice that there was a balance of choreographers who are in London and those internationally coming in as well. I enjoyed it, and it's lovely to go and watch all these shows in March with you as well.